Well, it's good, everybody. Hope you're having a wonderful week so far. This week on the podcast, Dense Pika. It's actually only Chris from Dense Pika. Alex couldn't make it, which is absolutely fine because I love having a conversation with Chris. This podcast is really interesting. It's a lot about talking about the past, the present, and the future of the industry and how we feel the industry is going, and also getting some like great conversation with Chris of like their success in the past and how it kind of happened for them, but also the changes of what's happening, the way art is being devalued, the way things need to move forward for the producer, the singer songwriter, how things need to change in the industry to kind of support the real artist in all of this. So without further ado, Dense Pika. Mr. Chris from Dense Pika, what's cooking, man?
Hey, man. How you doing, Will?
Pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Just dropped the kids off at school and, yeah, just about settled down in the studio for the day.
Happy days. We always do this weird thing at a podcast where like we've said this, we've spoke for a good like 5 to 10 minutes beforehand, and then you kind of almost have to act like you've like not spoken to each other before.
Yeah. Like being a news anchor or something.
Yeah, man, it's always weird. Thanks for coming on. I've wanted to get you guys on. I know it's only one half of you, but I've always wanted to get you guys on this conversation. I know when we were in Manchester last year or the year before, I can't even remember
a few years ago,
how long ago that was. We were talking about podcasts, and you were like in this weird mind frame where you were like, I'm unsure if I want to go on podcasts, but I love listening to them, etc., etc. And I'm glad you came on mine before Scuba's, so fuck you, Scuba, if you're listening.
Well, I literally got off the phone to him 10 minutes ago. I was just about to go on Clarke's podcast. He was like, "Fuck's sake, man." He's a really good, he's a really good pal of mine, man. We have a good time together.
I'm gonna text him. I'm gonna text him now and go, hey, sorry for having Chris on before you, mate.
Yeah. I think he secretly actually doesn't want to have me on anyway, so it's fine. Otherwise, he would have done, right? We've been mates for years. No, I'm joking. His podcast is brilliant, actually. As is yours. I mean, I used to go to sort of runs and go to the gym stuff and listen to mixes, and now I just listen to podcasts, basically, like people talking, men talking about techno whilst in the gym. But then, so those were never around when I was younger. When I started, trying to be a DJ and a producer when I was like 18, so it's like 97, 98. If I'd had access to the information that is in a lot of these podcasts, I think it would have helped me a lot, because there's unbelievable information and insights into the industry and insights into everything production and insights into life on the road, mental health. All these things are just so valuable, and I think it's really good that they're available to everyone now.
Yeah, I think I totally agree, and I think realistically, I can't stand listening to mixes. I never listen to mixes now. Like I kind of like at the beginning of my career, I'd listen to a lot, and I don't know. I think there's a level of like, I don't know about you, but when you're in it so much and you've been doing it for so long, I kind of get a bit jaded, if you know what I mean. And I think by listening to people that are in it and like-minded people, and I think that massively helps even like without sounding wanky, like the mental health aspect of it, right? Because I think we can all relate. And I think when you're listening to somebody else and they're going through the same things, or they're having the same issues, or they're actually answering one of your problems that you're kind of going through, I think it's really helpful. And there was never the rhetoric in the industry. No one ever talked.
Well, I think that's also just a kind of sign of the times as well, to be honest. When I first started touring as Glimpse, before I was doing Dense Pika, which was probably 2002, there were no iPhones. My rider was on a printed out piece of paper. And if I was on tour in Australia, I'd have to take the, a 24 series or something, because everything was on DVD, because you couldn't download everything. So I'd have to choose my DVDs to watch on my PC CD player really fucking carefully, because you couldn't load up an iPad with 400 hours of stuff to watch. and mental health was like, it was like being in the trenches. You know, it
Yeah.
was like there was no concern of mental health. It was like, you're lucky to get the gigs, mate. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now
Yeah,
it's a very
definitely.
different, landscape now, and it should be a different landscape, you know. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it is, touring is really, really hard work, and to be honest, it's not for me anymore, really. You
I
know,
was going to say, how have you changed over the years on like your touring
um,
choices?
well, I pretty much toured for 20 years. Like,
Yeah.
from Glimpse, I was touring every week on my own, which was a very different beast to touring with Alex in Dense Pika.
Yeah.
You know, Al's one of my best mates, and you know, I love the guy dearly. We have had a lot of fun together,
Mm.
and you know, it's much more fun being on the road with a friend. So the pluses way outweigh the minuses. Obviously, it's not always perfect, but in general, it was great. But then, you know, when COVID happened, which was, we just released an album on BMG and had a whole world tour kind of in the workings, and obviously, I, being the optimist and Al being a bit of a pessimist, would be on the phone every day, and I'd be like, it's going to blow over in a couple of weeks, mate. Don't worry about it. And then, you know, one gig would go down, and Al would be like, mate, this isn't blowing over, and I'd be like, nah, man, it's going to blow over. And then, like 2 months later, it was just like the gigs went down like dominoes, man. And I was like, shit. And then, like, you know, I started counting the gigs and working out how much money I'd lost, and then realized that it was absolutely futile, and I just needed to accept it. And then COVID ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me.
Really?
Yeah, not getting it sucked, but like, you know, when you're touring that hard, and you know, you've got agent and manager and a family to support, and kids, and the price of touring I wasn't really aware of until I stopped, and it's a really high price. You know, you're exhausted all the time. I'd come back on a Sunday night because I was living in Ibiza, so I was doing lots and lots of transfers in Barcelona. So I'd just be so tired, and I basically realised how much I was missing.
Yeah.
Which was a lot. You know, basically every birthday and Christmas of my teenage daughter's first 12 years of her life. You know.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me as well which thinks I mean, obviously, this is my opinion, and there's lots of amazing older DJs, but I don't really want to be out there until I'm 50 doing. You know, lots of guys do that, and that's great, but that's just not my how I want to live the next 10 years of my life.
Was that COVID that kind of changed that mindset, or was that have you always been like that?
No, man, I was obsessed with playing out for most of my career. You know, when a gig got cancelled, I was devastated. I'd be like, oh no, what am I going to do? So yeah, but I mean, you know, and it has definitely turned into more of a popularity contest. You know, all my projects I've worked on, and the new projects I'm working on, have all been music driven. Like, they've all been like, put out the records, wait for people to bite, and then the gigs come in. You know, no one knew who Dense Pika were for 2 years. We didn't even have social media. We put out hand-stamped white labels, which I don't even know if that would be possible in the current climate, you know.
No, because I think just marketing in general, or the scene in general, has changed, which is kind of what I want to get into. I don't want to sound like a bunch of old men moaning about the scene, because I think there's massive pros and cons to everything, right?
Yeah, of course.
But like, also where you guys have sat in as Dense and Pika, even previous, like Glimpse is a whole nother project that I was absolutely obsessed with. But like
I love it. Only middle-aged men come up to me and say that. It's fucking brilliant, man. It's brilliant. Yeah, go on, sorry.
But like, I think where you guys are at with Dense and Pika, and you've gone through maybe 3 different changes in the industry, right? So you've kind of started in the vinyl era, towards the end of the vinyl era.
Yeah.
You went through the digital platform with Beatport, and then you're in the streaming platform.
Yeah.
And whilst all of that's happened, like, obviously you've had some massive records, but Cult being one of the biggest records in probably British dance music in the underground scene still to this day. It's one of the biggest records. You play that record to a bunch of 30-year-olds in a club that are all English, they all know what that record is.
Yeah.
And I think you've gone from the hit record era to hit records on Beatport, and now we're in the hit records on TikTok era or hit records on Spotify era. And I kind of just want to get your thoughts on like how it was back then, like how the industry works and how it's different to what it is now.
Well, I mean, the industry, I started off in like 1998 as the van boy for Unique, which was a distributor. So, but I actually couldn't drive, so I did most of it on a bike with 100 records on my back. It was quite dangerous when you're pedaling down Oxford Street trying to dodge white vans. And basically, we would be shipping like 9,000 vinyls of some releases. A big prog record back then was doing like 40,000.
Yeah.
But then, the flip side is a lot of the distributors went bust and didn't pay a lot of the artists. So, I mean, mate, the horror stories of, was it Intergroove or was it Integral? I can't remember. The one that was connected with Kinetic Records on Berwick Street. They went down and no one got paid. Like, people lost huge amounts of money, and so it was a real cowboy culture back then as well. And
it was Intergroove, by the way.
Intergroove, that's it. Sorry, I've got a terrible memory. But so it was Intergroove, yeah. So Intergroove went down, and so many people lost money. The guy disappeared, and that was that. So there was a lot more money to be made releasing vinyls. I had a deal with Compact, which was great, and they were brilliant and still are brilliant to work with. But then we moved into the Beatport era.
Let's go back to that. Let's talk money, right?
Yeah.
In this situation.
Yeah.
Like, you sell 10,000 records.
Yeah.
What is the artist banking on that?
Well, you can practically put the deposit on a house down,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a serious amount of money. Whether you get accounted to fairly back then is another thing. But, the first Glimpse recording records were selling, and this was like I was 18. Oh, no, I was 20. I was at art college, and we were selling 5,000 units, and that wasn't a big record, and that was the first
and that's
one,
the thing. And that's also Glimpse, right? Glimpse at that time wasn't a massive project. It was a very underground, like, it was cool shit. Like, if anybody listening doesn't know Glimpse, go check it out. But like, okay, so we're talking major underground artists selling 4 or 5 that.
That stuff still isn't even on Spotify.
No.
It's like, yeah.
But like 4,000 or 5,000 copies, how much you making?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, this is like year 2000. I don't know what I have no idea what I was getting as a cut. I just don't know. I mean, I had a P&D deal with Compact, so I'd have to look back 25 years, basically.
Yeah.
But it was different. It was different, and things evolve. What I do have a real problem with, and I think Beatport was brilliant for a long time, and there's a lot of gatekeeping in the genres, I think now, which I've experienced, which is very unfair, I think, on some artists. But I think, when Spotify came along and essentially just said to all the producers in the world, I'm revaluing all of your back catalogue to almost zero, and now instead of getting whatever you were getting for vinyl, which is just £2.50 a copy or £2 a copy or £1.50, your streams are now worth 0.00001p. That is just capitalism crashing into art, and it's not fair. I mean, I know amazing producers that are young kids coming up now, and I mean, how the fuck do you even get noticed? It's like, you either write big tunes and sell them to big artists, and they just change the name around and give you 10k, or you ghost produce for people. I've done all of these things, and or you struggle through and try and get noticed in a tidal wave of generic information that's coming out of the internet, and it's it's like popularity contest.
So to kind of push back on that, so like, the Spotify stream rate, just for anybody that is actually known, is 0.003 to 0.005 cents per stream, which
it's not complicated at all.
Which realistically, to 1 million streams generates about $3,500.
Right, and then
However,
the label then takes half of that. Then the label says the artwork costs this much, the mastering, blah 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 blah.
Well, before all of that, the distribution takes 12-15% of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then from that, let's say for instance, they just take 10%. From that 90%, most deals if you're doing indie, most deals are 50-50. If you're then doing a major deal, it's 80-20.
Oh, mate,
Like
yeah, completely,
it's just
man.
so realistically out of a million streams, the artist is roughly generating about $1,000 at the best of it, right?
Millions, a lot of people listening to your music.
So
you know,
I guess for me, how many? I guess what I'm trying to work out, like one vinyl sale equates to how many streams, because they do that, right?
yeah, but I mean, it's a very difficult thing to compare because obviously, it's quite interesting actually because my 14-year-old daughter buys vinyl, right? She's
Sick.
obsessed with vinyl, so we got her a turntable, and those I buy her, Lana Del Rey, Cigarettes After Sex,
Yeah.
Velvet Underground. She's into some amazing kind of emo kind of indie stuff, and those vinyls cost like between 35 and £50, right?
Yeah.
And then she's got them on her wall and she listens to them on Spotify.
Love that.
It's brilliant. It's a brilliant model. It's quite just when you think you're being fucked in one way by the music industry, something like that happens, and you're like, so I mean, basically buying her vinyl way outweighs any money I'm making off Spotify streams. I mean, but so that whole dynamic is almost impossible to compare, because at the end of the day, the really interesting thing for me is at the end of the day, like at the moment, producers are literally have been driven onto the streets. I mean, we're like clowns. Even the DJs, you have record DJs playing records all over the world at the biggest festivals in the world every single weekend. I see them on TikTok, I see them on Instagram, entertaining hundreds of thousands of people combined. And the producer who is essentially providing the music that DJ is then playing for 5 minutes of their set is making absolutely nothing. No one's collecting the PRS. The A Slice model, which I thought was absolutely incredible, wasn't utilized, but wasn't picked up by a lot, 90% of the DJs. The industry's completely broken on that side. And
so let's talk about the A Slice thing. So for anybody that's listening, the way venues are allowed to have music be played, they have to pay licenses. It's all multiple licenses all over the world, right? A Slice was a license box, I guess, that would, in underground venues, in club venues, in festival venues, would be able to track what records are being played. And the DJ that was playing, if they were signed up to A Slice, they would give a percentage of their fee, their DJ fee, to the artist that was the records that they were playing from, right? That's the kind of model. What's your thoughts on that model?
I thought it was. I mean, it's a beautiful idea, and at some point, I think it will work. I think Richie Hawtin is talking about it a lot on his socials, and I don't think it's a gone concept. I think it will come back because otherwise, the DJs aren't going to have anything to play. And the irony of this whole thing with Spotify or A Slices, the demand for good, creative, exciting new music has never been higher. DJs still want amazingly wicked records, and a lot of those records are written by an 18-year-old on his family computer, and he's coming up with something that's completely nuts that no one's heard before. That stuff needs to have value within it, and if it's being played out commercially, which it is, the guy needs to be paid for his art. It's not worth nothing. The amount of hours it takes and the amount of commitment and the cost emotionally and financially and of being a good producer is high, and it is worth money because there is demand for it. I can't really think of many other scenarios where, look at something like CD, for example. The demand for CDs disappeared overnight practically. So CDs stopped being made. The demand for music hasn't disappeared, but the value has gone. And that is just capitalism crashing into art. That's just dickheads in suits coming in and going, oh, wow, there's loads of demand for this. These lot don't have a union. They're a bunch of idiots. They're all creative, but they're a bunch of idiots flapping around we're just going to revalue everything they do, and there's nothing they can do about it. You know, if you know, look at the writers' strikes in Hollywood, they all got together and were like, "Fuck you, I want to get paid properly," and they did. You know, I mean, the chances are all the producers in the world aren't going to go on strike until people start paying them properly, because it just
doesn't work.
It just doesn't work.
Well, it's really interesting because with the I want to go back to the A-slice model. There's, in my opinion, it's a great concept.
Unbelievable,
but also I think there's flaws to it.
Yeah.
And I think the flaws to it is that the artist is buying the music, right? The DJ is buying the music, right?
Yeah. Or
not always getting it for free, blah blah blah, whatever. But also that's always been happened, right? Like even in the vinyl days, the biggest DJs in the world would get free vinyl sent to their door, right? I think there should be a model where A-Slice goes into every venue. They could literally do this and go, for you guys to have these DJs play, for you guys to be able to play underground house music, underground drum and bass, all underground music, you have to have a license with us.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that's the thing, because realistically, you know this, like not just on a mental capacity, but on how much touring costs artists nowadays. And I think there's difference between Carl Cox and Richie Hawtins, right? Those boys, when you're earning over $100,000 on a show, right?
Yeah. And you're playing and you're playing other people's music. Otherwise, it would be 2 hours of silence.
Yeah, you can afford to put a percentage behind, right?
Yeah.
But let's say, for instance, like even where we're at, right, at our levels, we earn reasonably good money, but by the time you've actually, everyone's been paid, management, agents, fees, etc. You're walking out with less than half of your fee, right?
Yeah.
And then you also have to pay for life.
You want to try being a duo, mate? You can halve the half again.
Exactly, right? And I think that's the thing I think that's where the A-Slice model like actually was the issue, because realistically, a lot of DJs have to also earn a living as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of DJs nowadays play their own music. Like the percentage of DJs, producers playing their own music has probably gone way higher than it used to be back in the vinyl day, right? Because you just literally couldn't go and get a dub plate for that easily, but now you can put it on an MP3. I think there is a licensing. PRS is bullshit.
That's a joke.
It's absolute bullshit.
Yeah, it's a joke.
It's a non-for-profit where the CEOs are earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. And they only allow you to, like, I was talking to a friend the other day, they only allow you to backdate like 3 years, but they still have your money, and it's bullshit. It's like, no, that's my money. It's
criminal. It's criminal.
I think I genuinely want A-Slice to happen.
I think it will, man. I think it will, because it's not sustainable like it is. You know, things can't, you know, we haven't reached the tipping point where, you know, people can't afford to spend the time producing. And yes, it's never been easier to write electronic music, you know, in terms of the software. You know, when I started, it was literally like drum machines and synths and a sampler, you know. So basically, to be able to write music, you needed quite a lot of money and a shitload of time to kind of do it. Now you just need a laptop and a pair of headphones. I mean, you know, it definitely is easier. But you know, and the value of music is going to exponentially drop because of that. There's more people doing it.
Yeah.
But also not just that side of it. I think, you know, where are all the hits now? You know, like, you know, I remember like 2008, you know, there were these huge, was it 2000, that sort of end of the 2007, 8, 9, 10, you know, there was like Matthew Johnson was just like hit after hit after hit after hit. Then you had like Reg coming out. You had these massive techno records, huge techno records coming out. That doesn't seem to happen anymore. You know, you put a record out, it's been and gone in 3-4 days. It either goes up the charts or Beatport or it doesn't. And you know,
what do you think that is?
I think it's attention span. I think it's the TikTok thing. But, I've just had a situation that's been quite interesting where I did a record that came out 2 years ago on another project, and the record did not very much. And then I sent it to a really big DJ. He started playing it, and now it's blown. Just because he's playing it, other DJs started playing it, and then other things have started happening. And that can still happen with records. And I didn't actually think that could still happen. I thought once it had gone, it had gone. You could spend a week on a record, and then it's been gone in 3 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. Like it's,
whereas vinyl, it was sitting on the shelves behind the counter for months. I used to work in a record shop, and we'd have records on the shelves that would sell for 6 months.
Yeah,
and that just doesn't happen anymore.
But I also think it's a level of the marketing's turned back to the artist, right? Beforehand, like it was all the record label, it was all the record shop, it was Beatport, right? Like Beatport, if you got a banner on Beatport in the homepage, everyone was going to buy that shit. That was they were the gatekeepers, and I think now it's more so that the hands are now it's in the artist's hands to market your music. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect happens, is a lot of artists aren't savvy at business. They're not savvy at marketing. And
but that's why they get taken advantage of.
100%.
By other artists, taken advantage of by big DJs, taken advantage of by not the general public, because the general public aren't aware, right? No. Human beings will always go from A to B as quickly as possible. And what Spotify did was they realized they had an unbelievably valuable product with huge amount of demand behind it. And they created a business model that's got nothing to do with music, that gets music to the consumer as quickly as possible for what $15 a month. You can have all the music in the world in your pocket. But what they potentially may have done whilst building that model is destroyed the product they're trying to move. They've devalued the product that they're trying to get to the audience. They've devalued it to the point where the person making the product can't live anymore. So I have faith that it will change, and because it's not sustainable the way it is.
I think there's also multiple issues when it comes to singer-songwriters, and on the producer side of things, and on the publishing side of things. So what happened was when Spotify did these deals with the majors back in the day, when the majors kind of gave them the okay and got the percentage of Spotify ownership. Yeah, all the deals were built on master recording, not actual publishing, and then they just threw in publishing and songwriting at the end. And realistically, we all know publishing and songwriting is just as important as the master recording. There wouldn't be a master recording if there wasn't wasn't the publishing, wasn't the actual process of writing the music.
Absolutely,
so realistically, as producers now, like as singer-songwriters, then they're earning less than the people that own the master.
Yeah, I mean it's so upside down. I mean,
what do you think's the resolution though? Because I think we can all complain about this,
but the demand hasn't changed. Going back to like when I was the van boy for Unique, I'd take a drum and bass white label. I'd take a drum and bass white label to black market, and they would literally hold it up in the store on a Saturday afternoon and auction it. People would be like 50, 60, 80, 90, right, that's gone for 90 quid. Then the DJ who bought that white label for 90 quid is the only person in London with that record. That was the value, right? That was the value of that record. That's relative to public demand, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now no one knows the value of these things. A, because there's so much more of it, and B, because the water's been so muddied by these corporations like what you could say PRS or Spotify or whoever, that no one really knows what's going on.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like I also do want to defend the streaming platform, Spotify, Apple, and all of that to a certain extent, because they also have opened up the world of music. I don't think it's been done in in the best possible way.
No.
But it's like social media, right? We grew up in the era before social media, and we grew up during the era of social media.
Yeah.
And now we're coming to the end of it, or to the point, not to the end of it, but to the point of like, we know the effects of social media. It's just like smoking, right? In the 50s, in the 30s, it was healthy for you. Now it fucking kills you, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing. I think everything just moves quicker. When it came out, we were all like, this is fucking great. And no one was talking about the actual issues with it. Now the issues have kind of come out. How do you resolve them? And
they will be resolved. But
they have to be.
But as a consumer of Spotify, I miss the days where, you go to the record shop with a 4-pack and a spliff on a Saturday and spend the whole afternoon talking to people about music. And, the guy in the record shop would have a bag that he'd save for you for the week. That was a really great time. But obviously things move on. But in terms of finding new, exciting music, mainly outside of techno, Spotify's been invaluable to me. I mean, I find so much music that I never would have found via the algorithms. And, so in terms of like discovering new music, old music, I think Spotify's genius, absolute genius.
I think it's good, but I also think there's massive issue. Like, in my opinion, right, you go onto the artist profile. Like, this is how I don't really use the like algorithmic playlist on Spotify. I go and be like, I want to go listen to Dense Pika today, right?
Yeah.
The thing that I have an issue with is the top 10 is always going to be the same, because it's based on
sales,
on numbers, right?
Yeah,
so it's like your top 1 is your most streamed at this moment in time. And realistically, to find new Dense Pika music, it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
I have to go and click in certain different areas, and I'm not hearing what you're putting out. And I think there has to be something. And this is the issue. I think streams have dropped everywhere by about 20%, 30%.
I know that's an interesting point. Sorry to interrupt, but like every artist I work with has said, streaming their numbers have dropped by 30 to 50% over the last 2 years. Why is that?
Well, my theory behind this, and this isn't just Spotify, this is everywhere. I believe, well, I know on Spotify this is the case. They have turned their editorial playlist to based on algorithm, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, for instance, there's a house. I was talking about this yesterday. There's a house music playlist. Okay.
Yeah.
The editor of that house music playlist picks the top 20, right? And that top 20 is the same for everybody that follows that house music podcast.
Yeah.
The house music playlist. The tracks from 21 to 100 are purely based on your algorithm. So they're different for everybody else. So they can add 1,000 records into that playlist. However, everybody's playlist is going to be different apart from that top 20.
Yeah.
So realistically, the only where you're, let's say for instance, you've got 100,000 people following this playlist.
Yeah.
100,000 people are only realistically hearing the top 20.
Yeah.
The other 80 are purely based on your algorithm. So I can go and it happens to me on a regular basis. I can go in. I got an email from Spotify saying, you've been added to this playlist. Okay. I then go into that playlist on Spotify, search my name. I'm not in there.
Really?
So, and then that then also brings down the streams, because obviously, let's say for only 5% of that playlist. So you've got 100,000 followers, only 5% of those followers even get your music in their playlist.
Yeah.
So realistically, from what I'm seeing on the data and kind of in talking to labels and things like that, if you're not in that top 20 or top 10, whatever it is, you're not getting any plays.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just, I mean, is that not just an extended version of having your record put under the counter or at the back of the section in the record shop or on the wall right behind? It's like
exactly.
It's human choice. So who decides who has a banner on Beatport? Who decides where the record goes in the playlist? Who decides which records go on the shelf behind the counter or in the back of the stacks behind? it comes down to gatekeeping, really.
Which I think there's always going to be a level of gatekeeping.
Yeah,
right.
But that is also human nature. As a DJ, in a sense, you're gatekeeping what you think is good.
Of course,
and you're kicking out the stuff you think isn't good. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I think is, all of this stuff is kind of, I mean, my personal view, going back to the PRS thing, is there could there have been something set up like a blockchain system, like a bit like NFTs, where your record has some kind of a digital
ID.
watermark, ID stamp, whatever you want to call it, and then every time that record's played, whether it's released or not, I mean, you could cut the label out of this almost. That record is going to go back to Will Clarke, and then you're cutting out all these companies. I think it will end up in a blockchain type system eventually. Because that levels the playing field, right?
Yeah, but I think the A-Slice model works realistically if you're putting monitor, because even PRS does this, right? They on big festivals, they send a staff member to go and literally like write down all the music.
Yeah, but like literally, when we used to be playing all the festivals, we'd be playing Awakenings and Tomorrowland and EDC. No one ever came up and asked us to write down a list of the songs we played.
No, but you
never
can,
ever. I think there were like a couple of festivals in Holland that we would write down, and we were playing live back then, and like, we played like 30 or 40 tracks live in an hour and a half. We'd be flying through them, man. And then we'd write all of our own songs down. And then the PRS statement would come back way, way bigger, because obviously we've been playing our own music to like 10,000 people.
Yeah, because you have to do that as an artist. You have to go onto PPL and submit it. I send my team my like record box playlist for the like a few times a month, a few times like every year, like every quarter we go and update it and just like go, here we go, we played this, we played that, we played this. But again, realistically, because we're in such a niche market, like
I don't think it's that niche, do you? It certainly doesn't look or feel niche to me anymore. I mean, I think it was, but now I think it's like, techno and EDM and house and tech house, it just seems almost mainstream.
It is, I guess. Yeah, I guess you're right. I think if you were into kind of, the thing that I find a little bit sad now, slightly changing the subject, is, when I got into techno, there was like the Birmingham techno with like Regis and Downwards and Surgeon. Then you had, the Swedish techno with Bayer and Joe Marl and Kari Lekkerbusch and Delanis. Then you had Detroit techno, Chicago house, New York sound. Every city had its own sound, like even like Sheffield, like Detroit. I mean, the London sound, acid techno. There was this kind of real a sense of community in each city, and each city sort of had, like Neapolitan techno, like people like Gaetano Parisio, Danilo Vigorito, Rino Cerrone, Marco Carola back then, all that stuff. That was all Neapolitan techno. That didn't sound anything like Swedish techno. Yeah.
Whereas now, I don't know whether it's because of the software we're all using or whether everything's just been homogenized. But, the whole thing just seems so much bigger and so much like you can't tell the difference a lot of the time between this sound from this city or that city. Obviously, Detroit techno sounds like Detroit techno. But there's so many people who are doing that spacey Millsian techno. The Berlin techno sound has been rinsed to death by everyone. Like it just seems like the scene is bigger than ever. But at the same time, I'm a big believer of this, that electronic music should be in the hands of the youth. Old guys standing there going, it shouldn't be like this. Fuck you, man. It's like, it's not about that. Electronic music should be about how young, it's sitting there waiting for every generation to come and mold it into whatever they want. And that's what makes it exciting. There's some amazing older producers still doing amazing stuff, but I don't think anyone has a right to turn around and say, that's not right. That's not the way you do it.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I think it's kind of what DVS1 said, right? I think there was that kind of famous interview that he did, and it was like, look, I'm however old I am.
I've seen that interview. Yeah, I can show you the way I can show you the good stuff. Yeah, definitely.
But it's also like the fact is that the techno today that is the very fast techno that's very big right now. That's like selling thousands of tickets. It's realistically
that's going to burst, man. The bubble's going to burst on that. Just like
EDM. It's EDM
EDM
dressed up in cool leather shit, right? Everyone looks fucking cooler because the fashion's way cooler than what the EDM.
Do they?
The EDM. I think.
I mean, when I started, it was just like geeky looking blokes in black t-shirts, man. You know, and that was
but who also wants that? No one fucking wants that as well.
That, exactly, no one wants that. But like, you know, I think you know, if kids get techno and they get their hands on it and they go, fuck this, I want to make it 160 BPM, then they should. But it's not going to stay there. The whole thing. I mean, remember the minimal scene or the prog scene or the tribal house scene, all of these scenes, or the tribal techno scene. Remember with like Prime. Those records were so cool when they came out, and they were like, you know, 3-deck mixing. They were absolutely so exciting. And then they literally, it was like a dirty word overnight. And now they're coming back again. Like people are pulling out, you know, old Gaetano Aprizio records going, oh, this is classic Italian techno. Yeah. And I'm like, I was playing that 20 years ago, and now suddenly it's cool again.
But it's fashion, right? And I think this is the thing, is that music is fashion, clothing, fashion. It all comes around. It's all cyclical. It's all just goes round and round and round.
It does,
and I think like I never forget like living in Ibiza, 2008, fucking minimal house comes involved. Ketamine takes over the dance floor, and it literally turns into the most boring genre ever.
Yeah,
like ever. It was fucking awful.
But man, that stuff, you know, if you go back and listen to like, you know, Mike Inc. records or Studio One or like Basic Channel, like, or Robert Hood, Minimal Nation, like all the really original minimal records, man, those things are just works of art. You know, like
they're great.
Entire records made out of 4 sounds, which have got tension running through an 8-minute track.
But then Sam and Heater comes around during that minimal era.
I remember that. Wasn't that like the theme of the Olympic Games in 2008 or something?
It was a theme of Ibiza, but it goes back to what you were saying about hits, right?
I hope he got paid for that.
Oh, I hope he did as well,
because that was a big one. I didn't like
a massive one.
Yeah.
But again, like Colt, let's talk about Colt, right? Let's go back to like your guys' first hit record, and
that's just been ripped off big time.
In what way?
Actually, maybe not. I won't talk about that. Actually, sorry, we'll have to cut that out. You'll find out soon. But yeah, it's like pretty bad.
Is it?
Yeah,
that's annoying.
Yeah,
but again,
yeah.
I think like everything gets ripped off that's fucking good, and I think we're hearing that so much now.
But at least you know, tag the person, give them a nod. Don't just like post videos of yourself jamming over the actual track that you're stealing, and then release it, and then it gets nominated for a Grammy. Do you know what I mean? It's like I've got all the videos.
Let's talk about it. Talk about it? Tell me. People need to hear it. People need to know.
Fred again did it. With Jada G. I mean, he posted videos of himself playing Colt in the studio, and then other videos of himself jamming over Colt with her, and then basically rewrote it and put her vocal on it. And it's like a huge record.
Is it out?
Yeah, it came out. And
which one is it?
It's called, I can't remember now off the top of my head.
I haven't listened to is it on the new album, I take it?
No, it's not on the new album, no. But I mean, you know, he knows he did it. You know, in the comments when he posted the video, like everyone's literally just Dense Pika Colt, Dense Pika Colt, Dense Pika Colt. So I was like, I was looking at my phone, I was like, what? You know, looking at this, and I'm thinking he's jamming over my record, which is fine, jam over anything you like. But then basically went into the studio and kind of basically just took all the DNA of it and just placed some drums over my drums, played in the same key, all the same notes, same strings, same everything, and put a vocal on it.
That is the issue with this industry, realistically. Is like influence is so key. We all take influence from something, right? Yeah, of course we do, man. Like we have to. Yeah. And I think that's so important. However, when you're like literally just recreating a record, and like technically he should give you publishing.
Technically, yeah. I mean, we've all taken big influence, but I mean, you know, the story of Colt was just like, crazy story. I mean, it was like, it kind of launched our career into a completely different space. I mean, we had like Noel Gallagher came to the studio for the day because of Cult.
Really?
He did an interview on Radio 1 where he was basically talking about Cult, and we were like, my friend sent it to me, and I thought he was taking the piss. And then he sent me the clip, and I was like, because I'm quite a big Oasis fan, or was and still am. Didn't manage to get tickets though. And I told our manager, who was an amazing manager called Gel Ford, and he said, "Oh, I know Noel's manager," or something like that. And I said, "Oh, see if you can get him in the studio for a collab." And then basically 2 years later, me and Alex were sitting in the kitchen eating his wife's banana cake with Noel.
That's ridiculous.
For about 3 hours, and like, he's an absolute dude.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like, a hit record can completely change your life, and it did for you guys, right?
Yeah, it did.
It changed what Dense and Pika was to the rest of the world, and I don't think it does happen nowadays. It really does happen nowadays. But I think on a level of like what you were saying is where all the hit records. I remember living in Ibiza and like Man with the Red Face being like the hit of that summer, right?
That's
and
still
like,
a hit. That's still a hit, man. That record. That's an absolute masterpiece. That record.
Yeah, and like the washing machine and all of these. There was so many, and I think the last one for me that I can still remember, where a record where everyone played it, was Camel Fat Cola. Whether you like the record or not,
that's a really good example. That's a great record as well.
But it was, and I think something's changed now, where whether it's the speed of records turning around.
I think it's a lot of things. I think it's the speed of records turning around. I think, every creative industry, whether you're looking at sculptures or paintings, they go through creative dips and creative lulls, and then someone then comes along and breaks the mold. Obviously, like, it was a lot easier when techno had only been around for 10 years to do something super original.
Of course.
But now that how much can you do with 1632 44? It's like, it's a very restrictive framework to work within. There's only so many stabs and things you can put in it. I think one thing I do worry about is, if you look at some of the most exciting producers ever in electronic music, people like Square Pusher and Aphex Twin and Burial and Autekra and all these guys who are not big, loud, shouty social media people. How are producers like that going to break through? And there are going to be more of them, these absolute mavericks who are looking at the world in a completely different way, and looking at music in a completely different way, and building their own synths. How's a guy like that going to break through in the current climate? It's almost impossible.
I think the way that happens is they team up with somebody that's good at marketing, and I think there's ways. I think there's ways to do it.
But people that are good at marketing aren't going to get behind someone with no followers who makes this hairball crazy music.
I agree, but I also disagree. I like to think that, and I mean by somebody that's good at marketing, a good manager.
Yeah.
Sure. A good manager should be, at some point, especially nowadays, either good at marketing or be able to employ somebody that's good at marketing, right?
Yeah.
And I think, but to push back on that, does the Aphex Twins, does the Square Pushers, does the Floating Points, do they actually want to be big?
Well, I mean, I think that's a different conversation altogether that we'd have to ask them. I mean, do they want to be big? I think they probably want their music to be heard. I mean, I remember I used to religiously go to this night Lost in London, which was sort of legendary techno night run by Steve Bicknell. And I remember I found a flyer that I went of a night that I went to there. And, the lineup was like Basic Channel and Rhythm and Sound in room 2 and the Orb. And then that was back when there was chill out rooms, just like 99. And then the main room was like Aphex Twin, Jeff Mills and Richie Hawtin.
Yeah.
And I think Rob Hood was on. It was like basically the best lineup of electronic music I think you could possibly, I heard Autekra there. I heard, and it was like, as a sort of 19, 20-year-old, I was going and listening to the most unbelievable music ever. And I do also think that lineups and clubs now try to play it quite safe on that front. That kind of music is underrepresented in a live arena kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that also shapes the audience's taste.
Well, I think the thing, I totally agree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. I think what's also changed is how promoters promote.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is necessarily the promoter's fault. I think it's just a way of EDM, of how EDM culture changed the industry, where EDM turned DJs into rock stars, pop stars, not the geeky person in the corner playing really cool fucking music. And I think that's where it went from being underground to commercial. And now, let's say, for instance, right, like clubs are closing down because festivals are taking over. You have a festival like Creamfields where you have 500 DJs. You have every DJ in the scene playing
for an hour or half an hour if they're going back to back.
Yeah. And the tickets are 200 quid. Or do you go and see Dense Pika and Will Clarke at Fabric and pay 40 quid to get in? Like, it's a no-brainer in a sense of business, in a sense of like, what's it worth? Like,
I think money. That's interesting though, but I think that's also like to do with the time that we live in.
100%.
I mean, 100%. Like, when I was at art school, we all went clubbing religiously every single weekend. It was like non-negotiable. We'd be at Fabric or Turnmills or the End, or that was that. Every single person I knew was like clubbing, all the time, and that culture's now died a bit.
Yeah, because I think also, like, again, it goes back to literally what we were talking about at the beginning. DJs back then could earn money through multiple ways. You'd earn money through your music and you'd earn money through DJing, right? Now the only way to earn money is through DJing. So your fees have to go up, okay? Okay, your fees go up. The promoters have to put the ticket cost up. Ticket costs go up. People can't afford to go out every weekend.
Yeah.
So it's more of a special event. Ticket costs go up. Less people go to venues, which means that venues have to close down. Inflation goes up anyway. Can't run. It's all like
it's all stacked against you. Yeah,
it's all stacked. Yeah, and also I think promoters now don't book based on music. They book based on ticket sales.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading. Have you heard of this pay to play thing? That's pretty crazy.
No.
Where people basically pay to play at festivals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was reading that somewhere the other day. But it's just culture. It's popular culture moves on. Like my 14-year-old daughter, her friends aren't interested in electronic music at all, like at all. They're into like The Weeknd or Swedish House Mafia because they're working with The Weeknd. But when I was 15, 16, we were all listening to Northern Exposure and Sasha and Diggers and Global Underground. And when a record came out on a Global Underground mix, my God, it was like you were obsessed with finding that vinyl. And if you found a record that was on Digweed's like Hong Kong mix, it would be like, it would be like, it would just be like, I can't believe I've got this record, and that's gone now. That specialness seems to have gone because everyone's got access to everything. It's like, you know what the DJ had for breakfast, what his hotel room looks like, because everything's photographed and put out, the mystery of where the fuck does this music come from? How do you find this music has gone a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I don't know if it's ever going to come back like that.
Yeah, but like, again, like you were saying earlier, I'm definitely not a grumpy old man complaining because I don't want to go back there particularly myself. I think, it's like, I'd like to look younger, but, I think these things move forward or they tumble forward with no conscience of how they're doing it. And kids are going to get what they want to get,
Of course.
And it's going to take a different form. And that's
but I think the crux of this conversation, which is very apparent in the industry right now, is the industry can do whatever it decides to do. However, the people that are running the industry, in a sense of giving the industry the fuel to carry on going, which is the music, the art, have to get paid.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that side I do think is absolutely wrong. It's criminal what's going on at the moment, and I think it's going to change, man. It's just the thing is, it's like, you know, it's like the writers' strike in Hollywood. You know, everyone kind of needs to jump together. You know, like when Neil Young left Spotify and he was like, "Fuck you, I'm going off with my back catalogue." You know, all the kids were like, "Who the fuck's Neil Young?" And Spotify went, "Fine, see ya." You know, and then I think he ended up coming back. You know, so
because it's a huge.
By the way, I love Neil Young. By the way, that wasn't a dig at Neil Young. Yeah, you know, I just think everyone has. You know, how are you going to get all the artists in the world to go, right, we want to get paid properly? There's too many of us, and it's a sprawling machine of like kind of with a million heads. But the problem is that when you've got capitalism crashing into art like that, you've got businessmen that are really savvy, that understand how to harness all this kind of thing, and you know. Like, look what Amazon did to the high street shop. You know, like that's what, and you know, they're doing it to music education now.
Yeah.
You know, musicians that have spent 20 years learning how to write music, they've just gone and said, right, free music education in Camden for anyone who wants it. And it's like, hang on, what about the artists that have spent all the time learning how to do the craft? Surely that's valuable to pass on. So it's just people that aren't involved in something revaluing it.
Yeah, I also think, I think it's also, I don't know. I'd love to know the answer, and I think it's a conversation that has to keep going, and people have to keep talking about it. I know the record labels are fucked. The record labels are spewing. Like, I think, like,
I mean, but even the majors are, man. You know?
No, that's what I mean. The
majors aren't signing new artists. They're literally. I've seen and I've spoken to people like, we cannot sign a new artist unless they've got like 50,000 followers.
Yeah, 100%. But I spoke to somebody at a label that both you and I are related to, and they're at the point now where they won't sign.
I've had the same conversation probably with the same person.
They're probably not going to sign anybody unless they have over 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify, because financially it's just not worth it. And I think that's the issue, is that it's not the issue, it's one of the issues. Labels aren't willing to invest as overall to an artist. They don't hear an artist and go, fuck me, I love this music. We need to do a 5-year plan. We need to invest in this artist for the next 5 years. We need to invest £500,000. We need to invest $1 million. We need to do this. We need to start here and get to here to have a return on investment. It's simple business at the end of the day. If the artist, but I think what the real issue is when it comes to labels, is that it feels like it's always an us and them. I've never had a situation, and I've never heard a situation with any artist that they're ever happy with their label by the end of the deal. Where for me, it should always be we're doing this together. Yeah, right?
There should be symbiotic kind of.
But that's, and I think that's the issue, is that it's always an us and them, and there's always expectations on both sides. But realistically, if you're signing somebody's record and you're taking 80% of somebody's record, 80% of it is on you guys as the label. If you're taking 50%, half of it is on you guys and half of it is on the artist. And I think that's where, in my opinion, and I know I'm coming from a biased situation of being the artist, right? And I know the arguments against that, but realistically, like, the money that these labels are chucking around isn't enough to change careers now. And I think they need to realize that they have to invest on a long-term basis for things to change.
But, you know, it's risk analysis, though, because like that label looks at you as an artist and says, right, if we invest 100K into this person, when are we going to get a return? And I mean, to cover 100K advance nowadays on record sales, I mean, it's like fucking impossible. It's like impossible.
It's impossible.
Almost impossible, unless you have some serious mega hits.
It's impossible to do that if you are purely only working on one artist.
Yeah.
However, if you're working on 30 artists, yes, that's way more money, right? However, the likelihood of at least one or two of those going.
Yeah, but that's just spread betting, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, of course it is.
You know, that's essentially just spread. Yeah, it's spread betting. If I'm going to invest in these 6 guys and one of them pops, then I'll make money back on all of them.
Exactly, but I think that is the whole point of a record label, right?
Yeah. I mean, from my side, I think, you know, one of the things I've been doing a lot, especially with this new project I'm working on, is like loads of collaborations with, you know, people outside of my specific genre. Like whether it's a pop singer, not pop, you know, that kind of more of a poppy kind of thing, or someone who works in a different area. And I think cross-pollinating between those two things, and then taking their social media and, like, you know, so everyone's kind of gathering together all of their social media at once, but trying to just do this as a single techno guy that just writes techno on your own in the studio or with another person. It's super hard. You need to be collaborating. And personally, like, collaborating for me is one of my favorite things in music. You know, it's like, I love working with other people. It doesn't always work, but when it does work, it's like so fulfilling.
You know, I think it's like when you've been doing it for so long in your own dark room, and then it gets to the point where you can start collaborating, and you're kind of in the room with people that are like better at you, better than you at certain things and all of that. I think it's like, it's special, and you create something interesting. And I think this is where things change in the industry, is where artists that have platforms start collaborating with other artists that have platforms, and then don't need the label, don't need to rely on everything else, and you guys just do it yourself. And I think that's where it will eventually go, until the labels kind of pull back everything. And I think the independent label way is the way forward at this moment in time. And I think that will be the thing that will change it, because then the artists don't have 50%, they have 100%.
Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, if you know, if we managed to develop some kind of blockchain system, you could almost cut everyone out.
Yeah.
You know, then the label's no longer really relevant either, because the artist literally owns the record, and, you know, whether it's played out or streamed or whatever happens to that record, it's basically kind of, you know, it's basically, you own it. You own the whole record. So therefore, the record label doesn't even own 50%. You own everything, and then it's just you can just distribute your music yourself.
Yeah, I genuinely don't think the record. I think distribution.
I've got nothing against record labels, by the way. I work with lots of labels, and
me neither, man.
And I love all the record labels I work with, and I touch wood, I've not ever been really fucked over by a label, and I still work. You know, I still work with Paul. I work with you. I work with the guys at Armada. You know, I've worked with Planet E, Cocoon, all the labels I've worked with, Crosstown Rebels. You know, they've all been nice experiences, and they've all been run by people that really fucking care. You know, I've never had someone screw me over or lie to me, or you know, look at like the Hypercolor guys. They're a really good example, actually, a really good example of a really great label. You know, those guys. I did the first record on Hypercolor as Glimpse, like in 2007, and those guys were like Jamie Russell and, you know, Alex, obviously. You know, they were in it for 100% the right reasons, and they're still in it for the right reasons, and they're still releasing cutting edge,
amazing music,
cutting edge, exciting music. And those guys really fucking care. Like, they big time care. Same thing as someone like, you look at Radio Slave with Records. Really, good. Yeah, it's one of my favorite labels, man. He cares deeply about the music. He cares about what happens to the music, how the music is delivered and packaged, how the artist, you know, that independent label mindset will always carry on, I think, because it's just people that care. You know, it's like the difference
I agree.
It's the difference between buying a pair of trousers on Amazon for 30 quid or going to a tailor on, you know, who's you know, finding the wool, finding the thread, creating the beautiful garments. And I think it shows. And I think artists want to work with people like that. I know I do.
No, I totally agree.
I want to work with people that care, who I get on with, nice people, you know, and all the rest is just background noise at the end of the day.
I totally agree, man. And I think that comes down to true art. And I think it is the difference between true art and making music to be commercially successful.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, the commercially successful side of it is things are commercially successful, like you wouldn't imagine, like, look at Sam and Heater is a great example. Like,
exactly.
When he probably made that, he probably thought, oh shit, that's like Marmite, that record. And it is like Marmite.
Yeah.
You know, who'd have known, who knows what's going to be commercially successful? You know, when Camel Fat wrote Cola, they probably thought, oh, that's well catchy, but they probably didn't realize it would be as big as it is. And, you know, like when me and Alex did Colt, you know, we were like, that's quite, you know, we weren't sure about it at all. It nearly didn't make the EP.
Yeah. It's mad that though, right? Thinking about that is like, you never know.
Never know. You never know. But I mean, I'm a big believer that you need to be in the studio in order for big things to happen. You've got to work hard. There's no excuse for not working hard.
I agree, man. It's the only way.
Well, I'm a complete workaholic, so I'm in the studio every second that I can possibly get, and then hopefully something will happen. You know, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah,
and I think the thing is you've got to be in it to be in it.
Yeah, to win it. But I mean, yeah, 100%, man, 100%. But like sometimes, you know, when you're in the studio thinking, shit, man, I'm just walking the same ground over and over again, and then suddenly, like, you'll come across a field recording or some sort of melody or something, and you'll just break out again, and then I'm, you know, that's just happened to me last week, and now I'm like just desperate to get in the studios every second I can, you know. And
that's the best feeling.
Yeah, it's great, man. I love it. And you know, to be honest, man, I'm only speaking for myself here. You know, if no one ever bought my music or listened to it again, I'd probably still write it.
Yeah, but that's when you know that's when you know you're doing it for for truly what you're doing it for. And I think another part of the issue is because it's so commercialized now, there's a lot of people that are doing it not for the art, they're doing it to be famous. And I think
but that's the funny thing though, because like in order to get into one of the top 3 or let's say the top 500 DJs in the world, you're more likely to get into the NFL. I mean, it's that competitive. I mean, it is super competitive on so many levels. You've got to have so many ducks in line. The music's got to be amazing. You've got to look right. The DJ's got to be amazing. You've got to have all the contacts.
I disagree. The music's got to be amazing.
Actually, you're right. I don't agree with that. But you've got to have all the no. But you've got to have the man. Apart from the music, you've got to have all the other things. It's not an easy. It's not like I want to be famous. I'm just gonna.
I think with private investment, though, what's happening with private investment, that's coming into the industry, I think that's changed it massively over the years.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you now have artists that are literally a kind of like a superficial front to an investment company, realistically, where you have somebody that's very sellable, and somebody writes the music for them, and somebody does all the back end, and then you just have a product that's sold and that becomes very successsul.
But if you're a producer and you don't want to tour anymore, what do? You've got
that.
Do you find a DJ that's amazing DJ and also loves music and has got a great taste, and they can go and play the music and you can write it? Like
I'm all for it. I'm
100% all for that.
I'm all for that, but I'd push back on it being. I think if you've got a good team behind you, I think it's easier than ever. I think if you're also trying to do that thing by yourself, it's harder than ever.
Oh man, it's so hard. But it didn't used to be hard. It used to be like, put some records out, Richie Hawtin plays it, that goes on the record sleeve for the next release, and then suddenly your record flies, a few gigs start coming in, fee starts going up, next thing you know, you're touring. That is, I don't know if it still works like that anymore, really.
No, I agree. I agree. Totally agree. Dude, we've just done over an hour, and
yeah, man,
people are going to be bored by listening to us talk about
whinging.
I think a lot of people will get a lot from this conversation. So, dude, I really appreciate it. How can people get involved with Dense Pika? How can people get involved with your new project? How can people get involved with Needed Pains? Let the people know what they want to hear.
Yeah, man. Well, just hit us up on the socials. We're always looking for new music for Needed Pains, and always looking to collaborate with people. So yeah, we're an open book on everything, really. Just we like working with people.
Sick.
So yeah,
mate. thanks for coming on. Sorry to Scuba for you coming on before you were on his podcast.
That's all right.
I'm sure he'll be fine with it.
Cool, man.
And big love. I'll see you very soon.
Take it easy, man. Cheers.
Peace. Bye. And that's a wrap. Big love to Chris for coming on. Thanks to everybody listening. Please share, please like, please give us a review. Means the world. Till next time.